Thank you. This, when we tried to move this by UC at the last markup, Senator Levin had some concerns with it in terms of the Defense Department. I read with interest the Defense Department's opposition to this bill, and I must say it reflects the poor quality of work of their legislative shop in that they don't, first of all, either they don't understand this legislation or they intentionally misrepresent what this bill does. The letter we got from DOD points out that what we use for the definition of conference is the same as what DOD, but then they go on to say a contingency planning meeting held at U.S. Pacific Command to respond to provocation on the Korean Peninsula, and use that as an example that this would limit. This in no way limits that. This meeting would not have been affected by our legislation. The legislation exempts reporting of information regarding travel or conference expenses involving military combat, the training or deployment of members of the armed forces, or other similar expenses as determined by the director of OMB. Furthermore, the ban on sending more than 50 employees to conference abroad has a waiver from the agency of the CFO. All they have to do is say, we're waiving that. Regardless, it doesn't fit into the definition of conference when the act is implemented by the administration. The other example they give is nuclear assuredness inspections. Again, the CFO can waive any provision regarding sending 50 or more employees abroad. Additionally, if they don't consider these to be conferences using the exact same definition that we're proposing, it wouldn't fall under the requirements of this bill. Finally, their example of a soldier stationed at Fort Bragg attending airborne school at Fort Benning. This is the most egregious of their claims. There's nothing in the bill that would delay or prevent soldier training. In fact, the bill specifically exempts military training. The other thing that really kind of drove me nuts with their response is this statement: the department has always taken its duty to be an excellent steward of taxpayer dollars very seriously. Oh yeah? Most of this committee knows that's an inaccurate statement. So the very premise of their objection is they don't want to have to be under the control of having smart reasons for having conferences, and they don't want to have to report. So this is about accountability, and the Defense Department, the biggest agency of the federal government, ought to have to comply with some very simple rules on conferences, not military training, not arsenal inspections, not nuclear proliferation issues, on conferences. And they were one of the most egregious in terms of wasting money on conferences. The worst was the Agriculture Department. So we have a bipartisan bill between Senator Heitkamp, myself, and the wonderful senator from Missouri. And we've worked after the last to really modify this, make it as easy as we can. We've got exemptions in there for the chief financial officers can exempt against this bill. So what's the problem? The problem is the Defense Department doesn't want to be held accountable, and they should be. And so I think we ought to pass this bill and move it to the floor. First of all, there's no language in this bill that requires the average Defense Department conference to have a cost-benefit analysis. There's none. The second point is the definition of conference is the same definition that's being used by OMB now that the Defense Department is complying with. And the third point is they're twisting the words for saying when they're looking at a threat in North Korea that that's a conference. That's not a conference by the definition. It doesn't come anywhere close to the definition as OMB has laid it out. Again, when we started on this in 2009 on conferences, there were almost $900 million spent a year. Conferences were markedly extreme to the extent that they were used as a benefit for employees rather than for a benefit for further education. And the OMB has done a lot to bring it down. But it's the same argument that's made on Susan Collins' bill. They have, but until we put something in statute to actually control this, we're not going to know that it's going to continue. And so I applaud for the reduction that they've made across the board, but we still should have controls on how we spend money Remember, the money we spend on conferences isn't money we have. It's money we're borrowing. We're going to run $480 to $580 billion deficit this year, maybe a little bit less than that. But we're not going to be in balance for a long time. So priorities of how we spend money, making the Defense Department make a decision, is this worth the money? And then reporting, we spent $50,000 on a conference. The problem is the Defense Department can hardly report on anything right now. If you look at their financing systems and the problems they have in terms of procurement, they actually in a lot of areas don't know. So holding them accountable, just like we hold every other agency accountable, is not a bad thing. And I'm strongly supportive of this bill. We have made great headway on conferences, thanks to this committee and also thanks to the OMB, and we need to put it in statute.